Nikki had always been a quite thoughtful child, growing up in the small, close-knit village where everyone knew everyone. Her parents were kind and hardworking people. Though they were very poor, they raised her with all the love they could, even if they couldn't give her the material luxuries other children enjoyed. Despite their struggles, Nikki's family was happy and she grew up surrounded by warmth and affection. Nikki's beauty was apparent even as a young child. Her long flowing black hair, deep expressive eyes, and soft caramel skin made her stand out in her little village. People would often comment on how strikingly beautiful she was. Her parents always reminded her that beauty came from within. Her true charm lay in her quiet intelligence and her kindness towards others. Her parents had taught her to be humble and grateful for what she had, and she embodied those values in everything she did. But then, disaster struck. When Nikki was 12, a sudden illness swept through the village, and both her parents fell ill. Within a month, they were gone, leaving Nikki alone to face the harsh world. She had no siblings, and with no other relatives nearby, she was devastated and lost. Her parents' death left her in a state of despair, and she was unsure of what would become of her. Nikki's aunt, Sarah, who lived in the city, came to the village after hearing the news. Sarah had always been a busy woman, deeply involved in her business and always on the move. She was her mother's elder sister, and though they haven't been that close, she felt an obligation to take Nikki in. Clara arrived in the village, took care of the funeral arrangement, and then took Nikki back with her to the city. For Nikki, moving to the city was overwhelming. Everything was different: the voice, the people, the pace of life. Sarah's home was much larger than anything Nikki had ever known, and it was filled with modern comforts that felt foreign to her. But while the physical surroundings were grand, the emotional warmth that she had known in her village was missing. Sarah was often busy traveling for work, and her two sons, Victor and Michael, made it clear from the beginning that they didn't want her there. Victor and Michael were both a few years older than Nikki. Victor was 16 and Michael was 15, while Nikki had just turned 13. The two boys were popular at their school, but their charm masked a cruel streak. They were used to getting their ways, and the sudden appearance of a cousin from the village didn't sit well with them. They saw her as an outsider, someone who didn't belong in their world of privilege and luxury. From the moment Nikki arrived, they made it clear that she wasn't welcome. Sarah, who was also away on business trips, didn't see the tension brewing in her household. She enrolled Nikki in the same prestigious private school that her sons attended, hoping to give her a good education. She believed she was doing the right thing by giving Nikki the opportunities her parents could never have afforded. When Nikki started at the new school, she felt out of place. It was an elite institution filled with children from wealthy families, and Nikki's background made her stand out. She had grown up in a rural village, and while she had always been a top student, the atmosphere at the city school was intimidating. The other students wore designer clothes, carried expensive gadgets, and spoke casually about vacations in exotic places. But despite her initial nervousness, Nikki quickly proved herself. She was not only intelligent, but incredibly hardworking. She threw herself into her studies, determined to honor the memory of her parents by succeeding in school. Her teachers were impressed by her diligence, and it wasn't long before she started topping her class. Nikki's beauty also became a topic of conversation at school. Boys were fascinated by her, and she also caught people staring at her as she walked down the hallways. Her natural elegance and grace set her apart from the other girls. And though she tried to keep to herself, it was impossible to go unnoticed. Nicki wasn't just beautiful, she was captivating, and soon she became the talk of the school. Victor and Michael couldn't stand it. At home, they had grown used to being the center of attention, and at school, they were used to being the popular boys. But now, all anyone seemed to talk about was Nicki. How smart she was, how beautiful she was, how quickly she had accepted to city life and adapted to it. And the fact that she consistently outperformed them in school only made things worse. Each time report cards were released, Nicki's name was at the top. Victor and Michael, on the other hand, were struggling. They were more interested in hanging out with their friends, playing video games, and enjoying their school status than in studying. Their grades were average at best, and the comparison to Nicki stung. Sarah, proud of her niece's accomplishments, often praised Nicki in front of the boys, which only fueled their resentment. Victor and Michael began to take their frustration out on Nicki in cruel ways. At first, it was small things, snide talks, snide comments, dirty looks, mocking her assets, or have humble background. They would laugh at her clothes, which weren't as fashionable as the other girls' outfits. And they took every opportunity to make her feel inferior. But when Nicki didn't react to their stunt, their bullying escalated. They began to force her to do all the household chores. Victor and Michael would leave their rooms in complete disarray, expecting Nicki to clean up after them. They made her wash their clothes, clean the kitchen, and do all the tasks they were too lazy to do themselves. While they lounged around, Nicki worked tirelessly to keep the house in order. Worse, they would intentionally make her life more difficult. They would track mud into the house, knowing she had have to clean it up or throw their clothes on the floor right after she has just finished washing them. And while they never physically hurt her, the emotional abuse was relentless. They took pleasure in seeing her struggle, enjoying the power they had over her. Sarah remained oblivious to all of this. When she was home, Victor and Michael behaved like perfect sons, charming and polite. But as soon as she left for another business trip, they reverted to their true selves. Nicki, out of respect for her aunt and fearing that things would get even worse, never told Sarah about the way her cousins treated her. What Sarah didn't know was that her sons were involved in far worse activities outside the home. Victor and Michael had fallen in with a bad group at school. They had joined a group of boys who were notorious for their rebellious behavior. They smoked, drank, and partied late into the night, often skipping schools to hang out with their gangs. They were involved in all kinds of reckless activities, including vandalism, shoplifting, and even bullying other students. One day, Michael and Victor gathered with their gang members in an abandoned classroom at school. There were 5 of them in total, and as they sat together, they began plotting how to hurt Nicki. Each member threw out different ideas. Tunde, one of the boys, suggested they beat her up, while others proposed tying her up and throwing her into a river. After debating various cruel suggestions, they ultimately decided that they would all rape her, intending to destroy her life and spirit. The opportunity to execute their vile plan came when Nicki's aunt left for one of her business trips. On a quiet weekend afternoon, the boys assembled at Victor and Michael's house. They ensured that no one was around to interfere with their scheme. And one by one, they took turns brutally assaulting Nicki. When they had all finished, they left her in excruciating pain, both physically and emotionally, reveling in their success. After leaving, they threatened her, warning that if she ever told anyone what they had done, they would kill her and dump her body in the river, leaving it for the fish to devour. Nicki was overwhelmed with fear, sadness, and trauma after the horrific incident. From that day on, her life was completely altered. She couldn't eat, focus in school, or find peace. Every time she saw one of the boys who assaulted her, a wave of pain and anger flooded her heart. The threats they had made kept her silent. She knew if she told anyone, especially her aunt, no one would believe her. She feared that her aunt might blame her, and she couldn't trust the authorities either. The boys came from wealthy, influential families, and reporting them would likely lead to nothing but more shame and humiliation. One day, unable to bear the shame and the constant presence of Victor, Michael, and the other boys, Nicki decided to leave. Without a word, she disappeared from the home that once offered her refuge, escaping the nightmare that had become her life. Days turned into months, and months into years, but Nicki never returned. Her aunt searched for her tirelessly, but it was in vain. Victor and Michael fabricated a story to cover up her disappearance, and their mother believed their lies without question. Years passed, and though Nicki grew into an even more beautiful woman, she was hardened by bitterness and anger. The memory of what those boys did to her never left her. It haunted her, fueling a deep desire for revenge. Determined to make them pay, Nicki carefully planned her retribution over the course of several months, methodically designing a way to destroy each of her abusers. Her first target was Tunde, one of the boys who had assaulted her. On the day of his 19th birthday, Tunde's house was filled with family and friends celebrating. Nicki, fully aware of the event, decided it was the perfect time to strike. Disguised as a guy, she slipped into the party unnoticed. With ease, she drugged Tunde's drink, taking advantage of his reckless behavior. When he was heavily intoxicated and barely conscious, Nicki dragged him into a room. She made sure he was just sober enough to recognize her. As Tunde pleaded for his life, it was already too late. Nicki stabbed him 5 times and left a note on the bed. It's payback time, and I am loving it. She left the house before anyone noticed, leaving Tunde's family to discover the horrific scene. Our next target was David, another of the boys who had just returned from the United Kingdom after completing his university degree. Disguising herself again, this time as a stranded woman, Nicki waited by the roadside until David and his driver stopped to help. After being let into the car, they drove for a while, engaging in brief chilly conversation, before she asked the driver to pull over so she could release herself. Once she was in a secluded area, she screamed for help. David rushed to her side, only to find her sitting on the ground, her back to him. Concerned, David asked if she was okay, but she didn't respond. As she approached her, Nicki struck swiftly, pinning him down and stabbing him 5 times, just as he had done to Tunde. She left a similar note, "It's payback time and I'm loving it." The death of Tunde and David shocked their families and the entire community. The police were called in and they quickly suspected foul play due to the notes left at the crime scene. Investigation began, but Nicki, ever cautious, decided to lay low for a while. She knew the authorities were closing in, but her thirst for vengeance wasn't quenched. She was determined not to stop until every one of her abusers had paid for what they had done to her. Hello beautiful people, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's Blessing Matthew and I'm back again with another intriguing and mind-blowing story. That's the end of the episode 1. If you've enjoyed the story so far and you want me to continue the story, please do well to write continue in the comment section. I'll be glad to drop the other episodes. And lastly guys, subscribe, like this video, and please do not forget to share. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remain blessed. I love you.